Of the UUCB Forum. This is our first of the season for this year, and it begins our third season of hosting these kinds of community forums. And so welcome to you. If you are here as the first time, I'll go over the sort of the housekeeping details for you, and for the rest of us that have been regulars, you'll know all this. I feel a little bit like a flight attendant when I do this. You know, lavatories are over here and exits are over here. So the lavatories are through that door and into the education wing, or the room to the south of us here. It's called the Sky Room, and the lavatories are off on that side. And it's important to know where that room is, because after our presentation and a generous time for Q&A, we will all retire to a reception, hopefully all. Retire to a reception in the Sky Room for even more informal conversation with our guest tonight and with one another about these important topics, which of course is Dr. Alan Gilbert, speaking tonight on global settings, election politics, and more. There's a free will basket just by this door that you entered if you're so inclined. Our expenses are minimal unless we have to someday find flight fare and a large honorarium for Condoleezza Rice or someone to come here, but we'd love to have your participation with whatever you would care to leave in the offering basket back there. Also, at the table out in the hallway where you entered, there's a clipboard or a sign-up sheet for any of you that would like to leave contact information so that we can notify you of future events. And speaking of which, upcoming are two events that I want to call your attention to. As soon as I find my sheet here. Henry, where is it? I got it. No, that's Alan Gilbert.
Oh, the new
forum. Oh, it's always the last one you look for. On Sunday, November 11th, 7 p.m., David Barsamian, respected journalist, creator of the nationally broadcast alternative radio program featuring media interviews with all kinds of lights and critical thinkers, will be here with a humorous and critical talk entitled The Annual State of the World Address and Post-Election Analysis. So that's the 13th. Sorry, the 11th, my mistake. On the 13th of January at 7 p.m., University of Colorado Professor Emeritus Al Bartlett will be with us. We've been looking forward to that. Had to postpone it once or more, I think, so far. But Al will be here to talk about population growth and global climate change, another topic that's high on my list and for many of us important to continue to learn about and discuss. So with that, I would like to introduce you to Henry Kroll, who's the founder and coordinator and chairman of our committee for this forum event, and Henry's going to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Gilbert. Henry?
Well, thank you, Steve, Todd, and so 2 weeks from tonight, that's when David Barsamian will be here. Sandwiched in between tonight and 2 weeks is a national election, and that's why we've asked Dr. Alan Gilbert to be here. I'm kind of conflicted. You've seen me wearing my San Francisco Giants hat. Who's from Detroit? My goodness. Well, I guess I'm outnumbered here, but we'll get. Just in case there's any, we're ready for updates. No. Actually, Steve was going to tell everybody to turn their electronic talking devices off, because we have a way of getting your cell phone numbers through our electronic devices, and we'll embarrass you by ringing you up during the talk. So I'm turning mine off. So we're also in the dark about the Broncos game, and there's another activity. I think we would have a larger audience tonight, but many people have told me that they're out making phone calls or walking neighborhoods for the presidential candidates. So we do have a cozy house tonight here in the Earth Room. And what I wanted to say is you've got that announcement. Did you also say about November 10th? So if you're really a diehard and you love this building, you come on November 10th for a concert of very unusual ranging music of quartets, classical music, right here. It's a lot of musicians like the sound in this chamber. Well, Alan Gilbert, I first met him having come here from San Francisco about 5 years ago, where I worked in public broadcasting. I met Alan at a book talk here at the Boulder bookstore for the publication of his latest book, Black Patriots and Loyalists. And there's been a lot of research that he's compiled on the role of blacks in who were slaves and what they had to contend with during the American Revolution. So it takes a look at this in a new way that many of us really need to understand. And I have a feeling he's going to weave this into his talk. And we do have 10 copies of this book. It sells for $30, but we've got a special price in a sense. Boulder Bookstores is covering the sales tax, so it's $30 even if you have cash or check. If you have credit card, I'm afraid we're going to have to add the tax, but if you want the little discount, you get a chance to buy it tonight and have it autographed and signed in the reception. So what could we say about Alan? Some of his colleagues are here, and they probably could say a lot. But he's a professor, is a John Evans Professor at the Corbell School of International Studies at the University of Denver, which I understand from my time near Stanford is also a very well-esteemed international studies program. And Alan had the good fortune of standing out in his class at Harvard. He stood out so much that he was kicked out. And for 2.5 years he was banned because he was protesting a little incursion we called the Vietnam War. But one thing led to another, and he was invited to be a member of the faculty at DU. It's named now the Corbell School of International Studies. Joseph Corbell was the father of the first American female Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright. And the other connection that Alan might weave into his talk is one of his students was the second female Secretary of State for the United States. That's Condoleezza Rice. Jeannie and I went for dinner before at a Nepali restaurant on the way over here, and we wondered what kind of rice they had. We have very good rice, sir, very good rice. I hope it isn't condi rice. Too bad you weren't there, Dr. Gilbert. So what has Dr. Gilbert been doing at the University of Denver? He's been teaching democratic theory, international relations, the social theory, history of political thought, ethics, philosophy of science, philosophy of social science, the history of slavery and the American Revolution, comparative revolutions, violence and nonviolence, democracy, arts, medieval Islam, and medieval Europe. That's a pretty broad range, and we're really glad to welcome him here to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. Welcome, Dr. Gilbert.
Thank you all for coming. It's a special evening to be here. I was just on a delegation of civil rights leaders, which included Dorothy Cotton, who was the education specialist around King and the one woman in the leadership of the SCLC, and Vincent Harding, who invited me. And there were also a number of Jews who have gone through a very painful transition. One of them is Alice Rothschild, a doctor from New York, who was a young Zionist and discovered quite early on that what she was told was false, roughly on her first trip to Israel, and has been trying to do something to heal the place since. So it was a powerful tour. And of course, what we did was meet with people who are practicing nonviolence in the villages of Palestine, in the boycott and divestment movement, in the Holy Land Trust, which is led by Sami Awad, and Palestinian Christians do a lot about this. And so, thinking about the Unitarian Universalist Church, I, of course, thought of one of my favorites, Henry David Thoreau, who wrote on civil disobedience brilliantly, influentially for Gandhi and Tolstoy. And he wasn't quite into civil disobedience as we understand it. That is, his biggest hero was John Brown. And I'm a fan of John Brown, too. But he thought that slavery was a crime that meant that he could not pay taxes. And I think that he was awake and alive in a way that few people were at the time, although many people came to see slavery as something that had to be fought over. And he refers in that essay to being a majority of one. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that with regard to Palestine and Israel. And before I do, I want to say something about what might be an easier choice, but it has also some consequences. I want to speak briefly about the election. I want to come back to it at the end. The Republican Party, which is a party largely organized around imperial authoritarianism. It has very little to do with conservatism, and if you ask what its affection is for habeas corpus of the rule of law, you're likely to get stared at like they don't remember. Right? And they have a candidate who is a very strange right-wing guy who is a cipher and a shapeshifter. But he has made clear that among the shapes he's enthusiastic about being funded by a casino magnate who's a big fan of Israel. So if you were an investor in American politics who had any other country in mind, he would be legendary. But since Israel is in the commercial media more mainstream than the mainstream, the fact that this guy bankrolled Netanyahu in Israel and bankrolls Romney is not considered a problem. Not even something to bring up. Possibly many people, even in this room, don't know the name Sherman Adelson. You can find him in the papers recently. And he's funding a war with Iran. And he's funding a war with Iran because the state of Israel is trying to make itself very tough and dominate the Middle East. And that's a project which American politicians took up under Bush and Cheney. And so we waged two aggressions in the Middle East, in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And the Republican ticket, all the Republican candidates, except Ron Paul, to his great credit, were very enthusiastic about bombing Iran. So enthusiastic that it might have happened during the campaign, and Netanyahu actually came here to push it during the campaign. I was interested to see that in addition to Jimmy Carter just being in Israel and getting some publicity, speaking out about the kind of apartheid that is practiced,